They made you a villain, you made yourself a legend. One let pain define you, the other let pain refine you. And what happens when you let go, when you trust the process, when you let the unseen forces handle the unseen battles? You win silently, powerfully, and permanently. Turning misunderstanding into mastery is one of the most powerful transformations an individual can undergo. Often the labels that others attach to us are projections of their own fears, limitations, or misunderstandings, not reflections of our true character. When people call you a villain, it's rarely about you. It's about the discomfort your growth causes in their comfort zone. The moment you begin making decisions that don't align with their expectations or serve their narrative, you become a threat. That threat is translated into distance, blame, or distortion. This can be painful at first, because as humans we have an innate desire to be understood. But the truth is, understanding is not always a requirement for greatness. Sometimes it's an obstacle. Being misunderstood forces you to examine your own intentions. Without the crowd cheering you on or validating your every move, you're left with a mirror, not an audience. That's where real growth begins, when you can sit in the discomfort of being falsely labeled and still choose integrity, still choose discipline, still choose excellence. You shift the dynamic. Misunderstanding becomes the very fire that tempers your focus. It makes you dig deeper, think harder, and stand taller. You begin to realize that the absence of applause does not mean the absence of progress. It simply means your path is too original to be recognized right away. The process of mastery often begins in seasons of rejection. Being cast as the villain can feel isolating, but in reality, it's a classroom. It teaches you how to stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided who you are. That's a critical lesson because not everyone deserves access to your story. Some only want access so they can twist it. Mastery is born when you shift your energy from trying to be understood to trying to be excellent. You start investing in your skills, your mindset, your emotional control, your resilience, and eventually your output begins to outshine their opinions. There's also a psychological pivot that happens when you stop resisting how others see you and start refining how you see yourself. When you stop fighting the label and start focusing on the legacy, your energy multiplies. You learn to find power in solitude, wisdom in silence, and clarity in reflection. You begin to ask better questions. What do I want to be remembered for? What kind of person am I becoming? How can I keep showing up fully, even if no one claps? These questions lead to mastery not over others, but over self. This process doesn't ignore the pain of betrayal, exclusion, or slander. It acknowledges it but refuses to be defined by it. It transforms the pain into fuel. Many people let pain close them off. You learn to let it open you up. Misunderstanding is painful, yes, but it is also revealing. It shows you who's real, who's rooting for you, and what within you still needs healing. The villain narrative given to you by others becomes a lens through which you can see your blind spots and your brilliance. In that transformation, something unexpected happens. You start winning quietly. Your life becomes more about internal stability than external sympathy. You learn how to build without broadcasting. You realize that the deepest form of mastery is emotional independence, your ability to stay rooted in purpose, even when falsely accused, ignored, or rejected. This is where legends are made, not in front of the crowd, but behind closed doors. In early mornings, late nights, and silent breakthroughs, you don't need them to believe in you anymore because now you believe in you. What many call villainy is often just unfamiliar power. When you step into authenticity and set boundaries, People who once benefited from your silence may call you rebellious or arrogant, but when you understand yourself deeply, those accusations don't derail you, they define your path. You begin to see that being misunderstood was never a punishment. It was an invitation to mastery, to self-discovery, and to becoming the kind of person who no longer depends on outside validation. The beauty is that you don't have to retaliate. You don't have to prove them wrong with words. You just have to outlive the lie with truth. Over time, consistency speaks louder than character assassination. Mastery turns down the volume on the noise and amplifies your impact. And in the end, the people who labeled you a villain might never admit they were wrong, but your results will speak so loudly that their silence becomes a confession. Power is often misunderstood. It's not always loud, aggressive, or visible. In fact, real power frequently reveals itself in letting go, not in gripping tighter. When you release the need to be right, the urge to defend yourself, or the obsession with justice on your terms, you start to operate on a different frequency. You no longer react to every insult, challenge, or rumor. Instead, you develop the discipline of restraint. That is the power of release and inner freedom that cannot be manipulated by outside forces. It's the decision to trust a higher rhythm, an unseen order, instead of forcing everything into your own hands. The shift from control to surrender isn't weakness, it's wisdom. When you let it all play out instead of trying to micromanage people's opinions, outcomes, or narratives, you begin to notice that timing often does what ego cannot. What was meant to harm you ends up elevating you. What was said to tear you down becomes irrelevant in the face of your results. This only happens when you choose not to fight every battle that invites you. Not every conflict deserves your energy. When you let go, you redirect your power inward to heal, to grow, to build, to focus. That shift is where transformation begins. Letting go doesn't mean doing nothing, it means doing what matters and letting the rest settle itself. The need to retaliate often comes from unhealed parts of ourselves. We want them to feel what we felt. We want justice in our timing, on our terms. But life has a way of bringing balance, and you don't have to be the one holding the scales. There's something deeply liberating about realizing you don't have to expose anyone, prove anything, or seek vengeance. When you let go, you give yourself permission to live fully without the emotional weight of bitterness and resentment. You stop rehearsing the pain and start rewriting your future. The concept of surrender doesn't mean passivity, it means clarity. You no longer waste time in unproductive loops of overthinking, arguing, or proving yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. Release is not retreat, it's a redirection of your focus. It allows you to move differently with peace, with purpose, and with a confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. The more you let go of what's trying to distract or destroy you, the more energy you have to build what will sustain you. There's also a strategic side to letting go. When you stop reacting emotionally to every challenge, you gain perspective. You stop letting temporary people have permanent influence over your mood or your mindset. You learn to pause, to think, to respond instead of react. That gap between stimulus and response, that's where wisdom lies. And the more you practice this restraint, the more influence you actually gain. People begin to recognize that your silence isn't weakness, it's control. Your detachment isn't carelessness, it's maturity. There's a spiritual intelligence that emerges when you choose not to match energy, but to protect your own. You realize not every attack requires a counterattack. Sometimes the best response is silence. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all, because in stillness, things become clear, patterns reveal themselves. People expose themselves, and often what you were trying to force prematurely begins to unfold naturally better than you planned. That's what happens when you let go. You make room for alignment to take place. The paradox is this: the less you try to prove yourself, the more undeniable you become. The less you chase justice, the more justice finds you. People begin to wonder how you're so at peace while they're busy keeping up appearances, defending lies, or staying stuck in drama. It's because you chose elevation over reaction. You chose the long game. You chose to trust the process rather than manipulate the moment. That choice changes everything. When you let it all play out, you learn the difference between power and control. Control is reactive. Power is patient. Control demands attention. Power operates in silence. Control says, "Look what I can do." Power says, "Watch what happens without me saying a word." Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means stepping into a higher level of operation. One where peace is more valuable than being right, where energy is more important than ego, and where outcomes speak louder than arguments. Eventually, people begin to notice. Your name keeps rising even though you never threw dirt. Your influence grows even though you stayed quiet. Your life speaks, not your defense. That's what happens when you let go. You stop playing by their rules and start living by your own. And when you do that, you don't just survive the story they wrote about you, you rise and write your own.